10 kilograms. That is the number I want you to sit with before anything else. A shade over a case of beer. Toyota took the LandCruiser 70 series, a design that first went on sale in 1984 and lifted its gross vehicle mass from 3.5 tons to 3,510 kilos. That was just enough to promote the 70 series from a light goods vehicle to a medium goods vehicle and sidestep new side impact regulations that could have forced it off the market. The only visible sign anything happened is a set of side indicators more than twice the size of the old halogen units. Same chassis, same leaf springs out the back, same doors, same B-pillars, same everything that a pole hits when you clip a power pole on a gravel corner at 80. 10 kilos on a form, and a 40-year-old ute strolled straight through a wall that flattened a Nissan GT-R. I have had the trim off enough door shells to know that a door either has a beam in it or it doesn't, and no paperwork in the world adds one. That is what this whole list is really about. 12 cars that one way or another are not welcome in an Australian garage. Some cannot be registered. Some cannot be imported at all. Some are sitting in driveways right now because the company that sold them has formally asked owners to keep them away from the house. And in nearly every single case, nothing changed under the skin. What changed was a category, a test speed, or a line in a document. 2 of these have no repair available yet. The manufacturer has admitted the fix does not exist. One of them exists because the government's own approval paperwork was wrong, and the people who paid for that mistake were private buyers, with cars already floating across the Pacific. By the end of this, you will know how to check, in about 4 minutes, whether the car in your driveway is on any of these lists. Let me set the frame properly because it matters for all 12. Australia does not really ban cars. What it does is control the paperwork that lets a car exist on a road. Every vehicle has to get onto the Register of Approved Vehicles before it can be supplied here. And entry on that register is almost always a prerequisite for registering a vehicle for road use. It replaced the physical compliance plate that used to be riveted in the engine bay. Above it sit the Australian design rules, the national technical standards for safety, emissions, and theft resistance, which every vehicle built or imported here has to comply with when it is first supplied to this market. So a car does not get outlawed. It gets locked out of a database, or a state registry declines to renew it, or a rule changes and the importer decides the engineering bill is not worth it. The metal is fine. The metal is sitting in Japan or Germany doing its job for somebody else. It is the paperwork that stops at the water. Keep the 10 kilograms in your back pocket. It comes back. Number 1 is the one that fits the title most literally, and it is current right now. Stellantis Australia has recalled 9,199 Jeep Wrangler and Gladiator models from 2020 to 2024 because the electrical connection to the electric hydraulic power steering pump can develop high resistance, overheat, and ignite nearby combustible material. Some drivers first notice the steering going heavy, others get a warning light. More than 9,000 owners have been told to keep the vehicle away from the garage and away from other cars until further notice. Here is the part that would have me on the phone. The recall notice says the remedy is not currently available, with a fix estimated somewhere between July and September of 2026. So the instruction is not bring it in. The instruction is park it away from your house and wait. Think about what that asks of somebody. If you live on a suburban block with a single garage under the bedrooms, you have just been told your car might light up while switched off, and you should probably not sleep above it. If you are in an apartment with basement parking and no street option, you have been told something you physically cannot comply with. Nobody sends you a check for a year of off-site parking. Nobody covers the risk of leaving a $40,000 plus vehicle out on the road. The cost of the defect gets quietly transferred to you in a form that never appears on any balance sheet. And it is a wiring connection, a high resistance joint. That is one of the oldest failure modes in the trade. A terminal that isn't clamped hard enough, a bit of corrosion, resistance climbs, resistance makes heat, heat makes more resistance, and in the wrong spot with the wrong plastic nearby you get a fire. We have understood that since the days of brass fuse blocks, which is exactly why the fix isn't ready is such an insulting sentence. The engineering isn't hard. Sourcing and shipping a million-odd corrected harness parts is hard, and that is a supply problem, not a physics problem. Number 2, and this one is short, because the story is thin on purpose. Nearly 3,000 Australian owners of the Volvo EX30 were told not to fully charge their cars as part of a global recall over a high-voltage battery defect that could cause a fire. 2,115 vehicles here. There is no fix available, so owners were told to limit charging to 70% and park away from buildings until a proper solution is found. 70%. Read that as an engineer and it tells you something specific. The risk scales with cell state of charge, so the interim countermeasure is to keep the pack out of its top band. That is not a bodge, it is sound reasoning. But you bought the range, and now you own 70% of it, and the compensation is a letter. Number 3 is the only car on this list that was, in a real legal sense, banned from your garage. Yours specifically, not the car, you. In 2012, the ACCC monitored a recall of roughly 23,000 Great Wall and Chery vehicles with engine and exhaust gaskets containing asbestos. That covered about 21,500 Great Wall SA220, V200 and V240 utes, plus X200 and X240 SUVs, along with around 550 Chery J3 hatchbacks and 1,700 J11 SUVs. Customs officers found the asbestos in imported spare parts, which triggered the investigation. Australia has prohibited the importation of asbestos since 2004. The official line was that the fibres were bound into the gaskets and posed no risk while you drove the thing. Fine, I'll accept that. But the advice was that owners should not perform do-it-yourself maintenance that might disturb those gaskets, and that these engines and exhaust systems should only be worked on by qualified people using proper procedures. Warning stickers went into the engine bays. Sit in that for a second. You bought the cheapest new ute on the market. The entire reason people buy the cheapest new ute on the market is that they intend to look after it themselves. And the day that letter arrived, your own exhaust manifold became something you were not allowed to touch on your own concrete. Every gasket job now runs through somebody with a license, controls, and a disposal stream. The ownership proposition inverted overnight. Here is the part that has always got under my skin. The Australian distributor said it had written assurances from both manufacturers that no parts contained asbestos before imports began. Chery's explanation was that workers had mistakenly used a wrong batch of parts not intended for cars exported to Australia. Assurances on letterhead, a wrong batch. Meanwhile, the ACCC noted the trade already knew how to manage this risk, because cars sold here before 2004 often had asbestos gaskets anyway. Which is true, and which is exactly why the old-timers used to wet a manifold gasket before they scraped it and never ever hit one with a wire wheel. That habit came from men who watched mates die slowly. If you are working on anything built before the mid-2000s tonight, and that includes half the good stuff in this country, treat every exhaust gasket, every clutch lining, and every old brake shoe as if it is the bad kind. Wet it, don't grind it, don't blow it out with the airline. That is a free piece of advice worth more than the rest of this list. Number 4 is the biggest one in every sense. In February 2018, the Commonwealth issued a compulsory recall for all vehicles fitted with defective Takata airbags. It is the most significant recall in Australian history, with over 4 million affected inflators across more than 3 million vehicle recalls. I have seen the figure quoted as 4 million vehicles as well as 4 million inflators. The ACCC's own wording separates the two, so I am going with more than 3 million vehicles, which is the more conservative read. The inflators use a chemical called phase-stabilized ammonium nitrate, and the ACCC concluded certain types have a design defect that can make the bag deploy with too much force, firing sharp metal fragments at the people inside. Globally, these bags have been linked to over 350 serious injuries and 33 deaths, including 1 death in Sydney in July 2017 and 1 serious injury in Darwin in April 2017. The worst subset has a nickname. An Alpha airbag is a Takata unit installed in some vehicles supplied here between 2001 and 2004. American regulators identified them as far more likely to misdeploy than other recalled Takata bags because they were not built as designed. In the worst cases, the failure rate on the oldest of those is around 50%, not 50% chance of a fault code. 50% chance that the thing bolted into your steering wheel behaves like a small fragmentation device. Now the registration part, and this is where banned stops being clickbait. In November 2018, the South Australian Registrar began refusing registration for vehicles with Alpha inflators. From the 10th of August 2020, That refusal was extended to cover all remaining defective Takata inflators classified as critical. Owners identified as having got a letter with 1 calendar month to provide evidence the airbag had been replaced. Other states ran their own versions of the same play. The repair was free, and here is a detail almost nobody knows. The manufacturer had to offer to tow your vehicle away or send a technician to you, so you did not have to drive it to the repair. If you are ever in that position with any recall, ask that question out loud. Whose obligation is the transport? It is amazing how often the answer is not yours. Manufacturers were required to account for 100% of affected vehicles by the end of December 2020. About 312,000 vehicles were deemed compliant without having had their airbag replaced. Scrapped, stolen, unregistered for over 2 years, or owners who could not be contacted. Roughly 100,000 of those were simply unresponsive or uncontactable. 100,000 cars, some got scrapped, some are on farms, and some are being sold right now, cheap, to somebody who has never heard the word Takata. Number 5 follows straight on, and it is the shortest entry on the list, because there is not much to say beyond the sentence itself. Some grey imported vehicles with defective Takata airbags are categorized as orphan vehicles. Orphan, that is the actual term. It means a car that came in through a private import channel, so there is no local manufacturer entity that supplied it, and therefore no local entity carrying the recall obligation. The bag is the same bag. The ammonium nitrate has been sitting through the same 20 Australian summers. But there is no dealer network that owes you a free inflator, because on paper nobody sold you the car. If you are shopping for an early 2000s import, this is the question to ask before you ask about the timing belt. Number 6 is where the rule book starts eating cars whole, and it is the one that produced the 10 kilograms. The rule is ADR 85, whole side impact. In plain terms, they take the car, fling it sideways into a rigid pole, and measure what happens to the person in the seat. Not a flat barrier, a pole, because that is what a tree or a power pole does, concentrating everything into a strip about the width of your shoulders. It is a genuinely brutal test, and it is the reason modern cars have thick sills, side curtains, and reinforcement inside the seat frame. It came into effect for passenger cars and SUVs from November 2021, and for light commercials under 3.5 tons from November 2022. The casualty list is not what you would guess. ADR 85 forced the Nissan GT-R, the Mitsubishi Mirage, and the Alpine A110 to withdraw, and it had already killed off the Lexus CT, IS, and RC. $100-something thousand supercar hunter, a sub-$20,000 hatchback, a French aluminium sports car, and 3 Lexus models, all taken out by the same paragraph. The GT-R one still makes me laugh in a tired sort of way. That car has a structure engineered to survive a 180-mile-an-hour incident, and it left the market because of a test it was never re-engineered to pass. Not because it failed, because nobody was going to spend the money rehomologating a car in its final years for one market at the bottom of the world. Importers reckon it came back for a while through the specialist enthusiast pathway, once Nissan stopped bringing it in officially, then got squeezed again by later changes. I want to be straight with you. The sourcing there is trade forums and importer chatter rather than a departmental notice, so treat that detail as likely rather than confirmed. And through all of it, one workhorse from 1984 stayed on sale because Toyota bumped the GVM past 3.5 tons to 3,510 kilos, which reclassified the 70 series as a medium goods vehicle. To be fair to them, they also fitted proper autonomous braking with pedestrian, cyclist, and motorcycle detection, so it wasn't purely a stunt. But the wall that stopped a GT-R was cleared by a spec sheet. You are 6 in, 6 to go, and the second half is where the pattern gets impossible to unsee. If you want more of this sort of thing, subscribing is the whole ask. It costs you a tap, and it tells me to keep digging into the rulebook rather than the shiny stuff. Because coming up is the one where the approval paperwork itself was wrong, and buyers paid up to $10,000 a car to send their own vehicles back to Japan. Number 7, the Mitsubishi Cull ADR 98 was announced in November 2021. It required specific autonomous emergency braking performance from all newly launched models from the 1st of March 2023, and then applied to every vehicle on sale from the 1st of March 2025. It covers passenger cars, SUVs, vans and utes, under 3.5 tons gross. Mitsubishi axed the ASX, the Eclipse Cross, including the plug-in hybrid, and the Pajero Sport. And here is the detail that matters. Those cars all came standard with autonomous braking already. They just did not meet the specific requirements of the new regulation. The local boss said re-engineering them was not commercially feasible given where they sat in their life cycles. Production for our market ended around December 2024. Nobody said those cars were unsafe. Nobody said their braking didn't work. The systems did not hit a defined performance envelope. The accountants ran the sum on recalibrating and recertifying a model with 2 years left in it, and 3 nameplates disappeared from a market of 27 million people. The ASX had been on sale here so long it was practically furniture. Number 8 is the same rule, aimed at the cheap end. Suzuki confirmed the Ignis, Swift Sport, S-Cross, and Vitara would all be discontinued, taking the rules tally to 7 models. The 3-door Jimny was in the firing line too, while the 5-door came with the braking system already fitted. I genuinely do not know the final status of the 3-door as it stands today. Suzuki has shuffled that lineup more than once, and I would rather tell you I am unsure than guess at a spec sheet. Look at what got deleted there, not the flagships. The Ignis was one of the last genuinely cheap, genuinely light, genuinely simple new cars you could buy in this country. The Swift Sport was the warm hatch that people who actually enjoyed driving recommended to their nephews. Those are the cars that die when the compliance bill per unit stays the same, but the margin per unit is $2,000 instead of 20. Number 9 is the workhorse and shopping trolley bracket, and I am running through it fast because the mechanism is identical. Petrol Fiat 500 and Abarth models went, along with certain LDV G10, V80 and Mahindra pickup variants, and mainstream stuff like the older Renault Kangoo and traffic vans. The Toyota Granvia People Mover was chopped as well. LDV's cheap V80 large van had no autonomous braking, though its production had already ended anyway. A cheap van is a business's entire capital equipment. A pickup was the ute you bought when the budget genuinely would not stretch to a Hilux. When the floor of the market gets swept, nobody stops needing a van. They just buy an older one with older brakes and no side curtains and drive it for another decade. That is the bit the impact statements never model. Number 10, and this one is almost funny. The same braking rule also took out the Aston Martin DB11 and DBS, the Lamborghini Aventador and Huracan, and some versions of the Porsche 7 and 18. In the Porsche's case, production had already finished, with an electric generation coming that has the system fitted. A Huracan blocked from the Australian market for lacking a feature fitted as standard to a base model hatchback. I have no sympathy to spare here. Anyone buying an Aventador has options. I mention it because it proves the point. This was never about the quality of the engineering. It was about whether a box on a form got ticked in time. Number 11 is the one I promised you, and it is the one that should genuinely annoy you. K-cars. Japanese city cars built to a legal box. Tiny engines under 1.5 meters wide, taxed lightly and increasingly electric. Thousands came in as grey imports under the specialist and enthusiast scheme. More than half of them EVs qualifying on environmental grounds. The Mitsubishi i-MiEV, the Suzuki Hustler, the Mitsubishi EKX Space, the Daihatsu Taft, the Nissan Sakura, the Honda N1. Then the paperwork caught up. Those cars had been approved using Japanese rules that allow a lower speed side impact test, 26 kilometers an hour, for vehicles under 1.5 meters wide. A concession also recognised in the relevant United Nations regulation, but not in Australia's version of it. Our ADR 85 demands the tougher 32 kilometre an hour pole test, the same rule that pushed the GT-R and the Lexus IS out of showrooms. 6 kilometres an hour of test speed, that is the entire gap. In April 2024, the federal government abruptly suspended many of those approvals after discovering the oversight. The department's line was that the affected model reports did not satisfy the requirements of ADR 85. By then, buyers had already paid for cars that were still at sea. Some importers had to send vehicles back to Japan at a cost of up to $10,000 each, and others were told not to sell affected cars for a period. A handful of K cars turned out to be fine anyway, exempted because of the angle between the seat and the front wheels. I should flag that the trade does not fully agree on how wide the damage was. Some import specialists argued the K cars are banned story was overcooked, and that most imported K cars remain compliant absent a change to the rule itself. Both things can be true. A targeted suspension of specific model reports, and a panic that ran well ahead of it. What is not in dispute is that approvals were pulled after being granted, and that private individuals wore the cost. Number 12 is the one everybody asks about, so let's finish there. The Tesla Cybertruck is built exclusively for left-hand drive markets, which makes it unregistrable here. Tesla drove one around North Sydney on special permit plates precisely because it cannot be registered for road use by the public. The left-hand drive thing is not a Tesla problem, it is a national one, and the rules are state by state. Victoria's regulations require a vehicle less than 30 years old to be right-hand drive to be eligible for full registration. In New South Wales, light vehicles more than 30 years old may be registered left-hand drive, but that has to be the vehicle's original configuration. Something converted cannot be licensed even if it meets the age and weight limits. South Australian law starts from the position that a motor vehicle must be right-hand drive, with ministerial exemptions for older cars. On the rest of it, the commentary and the company flatly disagree. The angular shape and pedestrian impact is widely cited as a handicap, but is not actually a concern under the design rules, though it could matter to the independent safety body if it were ever tested. Tesla's local director described the changes needed as bumper widths, some external lighting, the drive side conversion, and a few engineering items, adding maybe $5,000 to $10,000. My honest read, the only certainty is the steering wheel position. Everything else is a commercial decision dressed as a regulatory one, and Tesla has form for tripping over the fine print here anyway. The facelifted Model 3 launched without an accessible middle top tether for a child seat in the second row, which forced a recall to fit one. 12. Now let me tell you what actually joins them together, because it is not safety. Go back through the list and count how many entries involve somebody discovering a car was dangerous. 2. The Takata inflator, which really was a defect and really did kill people, and the 2 current fire recalls where the fix does not exist yet. Everything else is a car that was doing its job perfectly well the day before and perfectly well the day after, and the thing that changed was a number in a document. 6 kilometers an hour of test speed took the K cars. 10 kilograms of paperwork saved the 70 series. A braking system that was already fitted and already worked was not the right kind of already fitted, so 3 Mitsubishis and 4 Suzukis walked. Nobody retested the GT-R and found it wanting. Nobody put a Huracan into a pole and watched it fold. They looked at the cost of proving compliance against the number of units left to sell, and they closed the file. Here is the sentence I want you to hold on to, because it is the one that gets said to you, and it is the one that is not quite true. You will hear, again and again, that these cars were removed because they were not safe enough for Australian roads. That is what a press release says. What actually happened in 9 of these 12 cases is that a car was removed because certifying it was not worth the money for a market of 27 million people at the end of a very long shipping lane. Those are completely different statements, and the difference lands on you specifically. Because when the cheap end of the market gets swept, the Ignis, the Mirage, the V80 van, the pickup, the base Kangoo, the people who are buying those cars do not stop needing transport. They do not upgrade. They buy the 15-year-old version of the same thing, which has no side curtains, no autonomous braking, drum brakes on the back, and a structure designed to a rule from 2 governments ago. The floor of the new car market went up, and a whole tranche of buyers got pushed down into a used market where none of it applies. I have never seen a single impact statement that models that honestly, and I have looked. And then the K car business, which tells you exactly whose interest the machinery serves. Private buyers using a legal pathway the government built, importing cars that had been formally approved, sitting on container ships in the Pacific. The approvals were wrong. Whose mistake was that? Not theirs. Who paid up to $10,000 a car to ship them home again? Them. Nobody in a department wore a cent of it. When the system errs in your favor and then corrects itself, the correction is retrospective and at your expense. When it errs against you, you fill in a form and wait. Same story with the Wrangler and the EX30 wearing different clothes. The defect is theirs. The interim countermeasure, park it away from the house, keep it at 70%, wait a year, is yours. Off-site parking is a cost. 30% of your range is a cost. A year of not knowing is a cost. None of it appears anywhere because the mechanism for transferring it to you is a politely worded letter, and letters are free. So when you read that a car is banned, translate it. Did somebody find a defect? Did a rule change and the accountant say no? Or did the paperwork get filled in wrong and now somebody has to eat it? I do not think any of this is a conspiracy. The pole side impact rule is a good rule. I have pulled apart cars from both sides of that line, and the newer ones are demonstrably better built where it counts. Thicker sills, real reinforcement in the seat frames, curtains that actually reach the pillar. Autonomous braking works. The people who wrote those rules were trying to stop people dying, and they will have stopped people dying. What bothers me is different. It is that the fate of a good machine is decided entirely by a cost calculation nobody outside the building ever sees, and then explained to us in the language of safety. The GT-R did not become dangerous. The Ignis did not become dangerous. They became uneconomic to certify, which is a real and legitimate business reason. Tell me the market is too small to justify the homologation spend, and I can respect that. I have quoted jobs I didn't want and been straight about why. What I cannot respect is being told a 40-year-old ute with leaf springs cleared the same wall a supercar failed and being expected to nod. So here is what to do with it. 4 minutes tonight, and it is free. Get your VIN. It is on the compliance area under the bonnet, on the driver's door jamb, or at the base of the windscreen on the passenger side. Run it through the Federal Recall Service. Every open recall for that exact vehicle comes back, not the model, the vehicle. If a manufacturer has sent letters to a previous owner's address, this is how you find out. Second, if anything comes back, ask 2 specific questions before you agree to anything. Is the remedy currently available, or is this a park it away from the house notice with a date attached? And whose obligation is the transport? On the Takata compulsory recall, manufacturers had to offer to tow the car or send somebody to you. That was not goodwill, it was the terms of the recall. Ask every time. Third, if you are shopping for an early 2000s Japanese import, find out whether the car came through a private channel. If there is no local supplying entity, there may be nobody who owes you a free airbag inflator, and around 100,000 vehicles were closed off in this country as uncontactable or unresponsive. Some are for sale right now. The bag doesn't know it was orphaned. Fourth, if the car predates the mid-2000s, treat every exhaust gasket, every clutch friction surface, and every old brake shoe as the bad kind. Wet it before you scrape it. Never a wire wheel, never the airline. That habit came from men who learned it the hard way, and I would like it to keep getting passed down. And fifth, if you are looking at anything discontinued in 2023 through 2025, an ASX, an Eclipse Cross, a Vitara, an S-Cross, a Pajero Sport, a Swift Sport, understand what it means and what it doesn't. Those cars were not recalled. They were not found wanting. They stopped being sold because recertifying them didn't pay. Used, correctly maintained, they are exactly as good as they were the week before the announcement. If that lets you buy a good car for less because the market got spooked by the word banned, then you have just been paid for paying attention. That is the whole payoff, really. Not that you'll avoid disaster, that in a year or two, standing in a driveway while somebody tells you a car is illegal now, you will be the one who knows which of the 3 things actually happened. And you'll ask the question that ends the conversation. Now, the comments, and I want something specific. I want to hear from the people this actually landed on. If you own one of the 9,000 Wranglers or Gladiators, or one of the 2,800 EX30s, tell me what you were told and what you have actually done about it. Not the recall wording. I have read the recall wording. I want to know where you're parking it, whether anybody offered to cover that, whether your insurer had an opinion, whether the estimated date has moved, and if you're in an apartment with basement parking and no legal way to comply with the instruction you were given, say so, because I suspect there are more of you than anybody has counted. Same invitation to anyone who imported a K car in 2024. If you paid to send a car back across the Pacific, I would like the real number, because the figure that gets repeated is up to $10,000, and I would rather have yours than a range. And if you work in compliance, or at a workshop that does model reports, or you stood on a dealer service counter through the Takata years, tell me what I got wrong. I've been reading regulations and importer forums, not standing at the counter. If the three-door Jimny story is settled and I just don't know it, correct me. The fastest way to stop being unsure is to get told off by somebody who was there. If this was worth the last half hour of your evening, subscribe. That's the whole ask. And I'll tell you what I keep bumping into and haven't sorted out yet. Every single time I go digging into why a good machine disappeared, I end up in the same place, a cost of certification number that nobody publishes. What does it actually cost to homologate one model for one market? Not a range, not a guess, a real figure. Because that number decides which cars exist in this country, and I cannot find anyone willing to say it out loud. There's a thread there, and I intend to pull it. 10 kilograms and 6 kilometers an hour. That's what a car's life is worth. Look after the one you've got. It might be the last one they let you have.